Well, they're breathing much easier at ComEd today because yesterday a federal judge agreed to dismiss the bribery charge against ComEd that had loomed, it's a good word, loomed over the utility since 2020 for its role in a scheme. Now, this is not exactly surprising news. Under the terms of the deferred prosecution agreement between prosecutors and feds and the utility, they said, okay, we'll seek dismissal as long as you stick to the deal that we cut. So let's start there with Jon Seidel. He covers the federal court building for your Chicago Sun-Times. John, thank you for joining us. Much appreciated. I guess this dismissal cost $200 million. Do you think ComEd considers that to be a bargain?
I think a lot of people see it that way, yeah. I mean, ComEd did have to do some work here. They had to keep up their terms of an agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office. They had to cooperate, and they had to pay that $200 million fine. But they're walking away without a conviction here. They are no longer charged with bribery, which is something they couldn't say for the last 3 years. And I think there are a lot of other folks who got caught up in this who wish they could say the same.
The CEO, who is not involved in the crime, the new CEO, a relatively new CEO, I read his statement in your piece, and it's right out of PR 101, isn't it?
It is. It's a pretty straightforward statement. I mean, and there was a lawyer in court for ComEd yesterday who told the judge they're very pleased to be done with this, and I'm sure they are. And the new CEO says they're committed to ethical business practices at all levels.
Well, that's great to hear, isn't it? Talking here with Jon Seidel of the Sun-Times. So it was 3 years ago this month that we first started hearing about Public Official A, which turned out to be then Speaker Michael Madigan.
Yeah. Actually, it was 3 years ago yesterday that this whole thing broke open. We've been hearing about the Fed's investigations, but it was July 17th, 2020, that they filed this charge against ComEd and first used the moniker Public Official A. And, everybody was watching for the next shoe to drop. At the time, Madigan was still the speaker. And it would be several months later that the indictment would be handed up that led to the trial earlier this year of Michael McLean, former ComEd CEO, and Pramaggiore, and others. And then Madigan lost his speakership, and eventually he's under indictment as well. But this was really the start, and it was the start of a 3-year deferred prosecution agreement, and the time has lapsed on it.
You mentioned McLean, Pramaggiore, Hooker, Doherty. They all face some pretty serious prison time. When do they get sentenced?
Because they're all set to be sentenced in a series of hearings in January.
Okay, and then Madigan faces trial April of next year, correct?
Correct, along with Michael McLean, who will have to go to trial again, assuming everything plays out as it looks like it's going to.
If McLean didn't roll to save his skin in the first trial, any indication that he may do so in the second?
I don't know. We're watching to see what happens and how, the convictions back in May might change the calculus. But we're not seeing it. And his defense attorney, I think, said after the Madigan indictment, which was McLean's second indictment, that he wasn't going to cooperate no matter how many indictments they throw at him. So we're watching to see if he sticks by his word. But, at this point, he's convicted, and that might, cause some credibility issues on the witness stand.
I guess so. But also when he gets sentenced, that may bring a little moment of reflection into his head, too.
It really might. Yeah, it really might. And look, the government's on a roll, and everybody has a right to trial by jury here. But you got to look at the lay of the land. We've had, I believe, 6 people convicted just this year as a result of these public corruption investigations. The government has yet to see any of these counts come back as not guilty. They're all guilty. So, you gotta think these defendants are all looking at it, and we've got more to come.
Acevedo and his 2 sons, they've been sentenced to prison time. Still have
Correct.
Mapes is going to go on trial. So is ex-state Senator Collins. They face separate trials later this year. That stems from this. AT&T also, didn't they cut a deal with the Fed similar to ComEd? They took a look at ComEd's deal and said, okay, count us in. How are they involved in this next trial of Madigan?
Well, so you might recall that I believe it was in October, the Feds expanded the indictment of Madigan and McLean and alleged that, AT&T engaged in a similar scheme to ComEd's, in which they were basically funneling money to former state representative Eddie Acevedo. And so you're right, it's the same kind of deal. It's kind of ComEd light. And they've got, I believe, a 2-year deferred prosecution agreement. So if, we're following the track that ComEd was on, then I suppose maybe near the end of 2024, they'll be wrapping up their DPA.
And will they have a similarly corporately bland statement to issue at that time?
I'm sure they will.
Jon Seidel, thank you. It's great job protection for you, isn't it? Great job security.
There's a lot going on. It is.
And it's like pulling a string. One thing leads to the next.
Yes, it does. It's all connected.
Jon, thanks so much for your time. We'll read more in tomorrow's Sun Times. Have a great afternoon.